What if anything is possible? I'm Eddy Cue, and my role is I run the services organization at Apple, which is services like TV and music that people use every day. I live the American dream. My parents are Cuban immigrants. I learned to speak English when I went to school. I was very, very lucky because my parents, for some reason, even though one graduated from high school, the other one hadn't even graduated from high school, believed that education was the answer in the future to a better life. I discovered an Apple II computer. I started programming them, and they were a lot of fun, and I just fell in love with that. And I told my dad I was trying to buy a computer, but in those days, 1979 or so, it's $1,500 each for a computer. Which obviously today would be about $15,000, so you can imagine that didn't go over well, given where we were. So had to save up money, but finally got a computer in my room by the time I was a senior. I would tell my parents, I just need another 10 minutes, and then they would wake up in the morning and I was still on the computer from the night before. So they were quite unhappy. But I just found something I fell in love with. I knew I wanted to go to Duke. At that point, I knew I wanted to major in computer science, and my dream was to go work at Apple and meet Steve Jobs. And all three of those things came true for me. My first job out of Duke was in Research Triangle Park. I was a programmer. My manager decides, you should mentor the intern. I'm not sure what I could mentor him in since I was 2 years older than he was, and I had 3 hours more experience than he did. But his father turned out to be this executive at IBM, and his father starts getting recruited by Apple, of all things. And he knew nothing about Apple, and I knew a lot. And so I kept telling him all about it and, and why it was great and why he should move there. And that made me kind of apply at the same time. And here we are. When I got started at Apple, John Scully was the CEO, and Steve had just been kind of fired. My first day on the job, my manager says, hey, we're way under budget. You need to go spend a ton of money. You got $50,000 to go spend on any equipment or anything you want for your office or whatever. I was thinking, wow, this is the greatest place in the world. But it was a great education of how mismanaged the company was, that was the way they were doing it. And the company started going under. Most people can't imagine Apple, but Apple was bankrupt back 30 years ago. And I was very close to leaving a couple of times. I was working on something that I enjoyed doing, and I decided I didn't want to leave while I was working on that. I wanted to finish the project because I liked what I was doing, and I wasn't focused on the, let's call it the monetary side or the successful side. I was interested in the work that I was doing. That was a key, talk about an impactful decision in my life. Steve came back, and I got to meet him in a meeting, and from that day on, I started working for him. The work that we were doing, I always felt was incredibly challenging, incredibly rewarding, and so it kept me very motivated and excited about coming into work. And I think for innovation, you really have to believe in what you're doing and how you're doing it. Because I think most times everyone's going to tell you you're wrong because they can't see it yet. There's a great line that Henry Ford said a long time ago, which is, if he had done research about what to do, everyone would have said they wanted a faster horse. No one was looking for a car because they couldn't see that. To truly innovate, you have to take some level of risk. And so I think the iPhone, when it came out, most people thought it was crazy because it was just a screen. Didn't have a keyboard, didn't have buttons. And it took, a couple of years, but little by little, people really noticed, oh, wait a second, this is way better. And so, it's hard to picture, but today this phone is, it's more powerful than any of the computers that I was using by about, probably about 50x. The thinness of it is just kind of ridiculous. It's hard to imagine, even though it's only been 20 years, that you could ever have lived life without it. You're so dependent on it. It's such a big part of your day-to-day life. And the fun and more interesting things are the things we're not doing. yet. There's a lot to do in the world to keep making it a better and better place. When we have interns or college grads, one of the questions that I always ask them is, what's the best day to be alive in history? And that day by far is today. And the next best day is tomorrow. That doesn't mean that the world doesn't have a lot of problems today. It does. But there's so much more opportunity today than there was back when I graduated to impact the world. It's important to dream and to aspire to things that seem unattainable. I said from the very beginning that I live the American dream. In one generation, I've been able to change my whole family. There's all kinds of things that we always thought were not possible. So I'm a big believer that anything is possible.